What's happening? Rick jamming on the grooves right
Oh
there.
yeah.
Starts off.
Oh yeah.
Welcome everyone back to the Drummers Education Connection. Today it is just myself and Rick Stojak, the two most handsome members of the
Wow.
deck.
Oh yeah. There'll be a lot of debate about that one,
Yeah,
man.
yeah. Well, it's easy to say when Bart and Chip aren't here, but we do miss those guys, Bart and Chip. We hope you guys are doing well. Bart's on tour. Chip is not available today, but we hope those guys are doing well, and we'll see them back here next week.
Yeah,
Hey, before
we're
we
gonna
get
miss him,
started,
man.
yeah, before we get started today, Rick, to mention what we're going to talk about, we're going to do student questions today. We've always
Yeah.
every week, as you might imagine, in a teaching practice, our students ask us questions. Sometimes it's about things we're working on. Sometimes it's not about things we're working on. Sometimes it's about coffee or pizza, things like that, important things. But in any case, we're gonna talk about questions that have come up the last couple of weeks from my students and from Rick's students. We're going to bat them around, and we'd love to hear from you guys. If you have questions of your own, please chime in the chat, or if you have answers to some of these questions or resources, please offer them up in the chat. This is all about community participation. So thanks you guys for being a part of our community, and yeah. But before we get started with our questions, we're starting to implement a new segment on the Deck Show every week called Good Things.
Good things.
And we're going to talk about good things that are going on musically and otherwise for us. So, Rick, what good things do you have going on right now?
Man, my really good thing is my audio video rig is coming together
Mm,
after years of figuring it out. And um I've always wanted to have my drums mixed for a live stream. And so I have everything mic'd up and I've got everything in Logic. So I've got the drums mixed. Hopefully that does sound good.
sounds great on
And
my end.
right on. And that's layering in all the electronics as well, like all the electronic percussion.
Mm-hmm.
So
Cool.
layering all of that stuff together, and basically I was working for months trying to figure it out, and I didn't realize that I needed OBS software
Mm,
to be able to do that. So if
okay, the
anybody's
missing
trying to
piece.
pull all this stuff together, you need OBS software, which is basically a broadcast software. And that smooths out the audio and the video. So and then from that I can even just go to the OBS and hit record and make quick little videos that way too.
Fantastic, Rick.
So,
You look and sound as good as you've ever looked and sounded. Have you lost weight?
no, man, that's the magic of camera angles and
Yeah.
lighting.
Yeah. OBS
Yeah,
takes off
yeah,
10 pounds. Yeah.
exactly. Yeah, it'll
No, it
help you with
seems
your
great, man.
groove too.
Yeah, you
So,
look your setup looks totally pro. Really
ah,
nice.
thanks, man. I have a big shout out to my student and my really assistant. She's evolved to my assistant Rebecca Sykes.
Mm-hmm.
Um, who started off as a student and then she went to Audio West School of Engineering and now she's actually working for Studio West in San Diego, and
Mm-hmm.
she's actually working for them now as an engineer. So I've had a student who's evolved it from I want a career in music to actually making it happen.
Beautiful.
And and we've it used to be her coming in and I teach her, and now she's coming in and
Mm-hmm.
she's teaching me, and it's all we realize that hey, all the technology that's just as important as all of the other stuff. So
Well, I love what you mentioned there about uh, you were teaching her and now she's teaching you. I
yeah,
just just last weekend I took my son down to LA to look at
yeah,
colleges because he's applying to study jazz piano, and we looked at UCLA and
yeah.
USC. But we go to Berkeley and Boston and Juilliard and Manhattan School of Music coming up. But when I
Wow.
was at UCLA, we came upon we were given a tour by one of my old students who was there, which was a beautiful thing. And he said,
Ah,
"Oh, here's this band rehearsing right in here. That's the part of the Herbie Hancock Institute. And the Herbie Hancock Institute is a master's program for graduate students, and only one musician on each instrument makes it. So they get one drummer, one piano player, one bass player, one clarinet, one sax, one trumpet, whatever.
wow.
And it's free. So if you're good enough to get into it, it's a free 2-year graduate program. They pay for your tuition. I think they even pay for your housing. I mean, it's like unbelievable. And
Wow.
these are some of the top jazz musicians in the country that apply for and get into this program, right?
Oh,
So I
man.
look through the window, and who's playing drums? One of my old students.
Oh, man. Jeremy, beautiful, man. Congratulations to
It
you
was
and
very
him
cool.
or
It
her.
was super him, yeah, Benjamin
Yeah.
Ring. If you haven't heard Ben Ring, you'll hear about him soon enough because that kid is a monster drummer.
Oh, that's
Um,
great.
yeah,
That's
so that
great.
was super
How
cool.
many years, how much study did he do with you? How long did he work
He
on
was with
it?
me for maybe I want to say like 4 years, from like 10 to
Wow.
14 around there.
Wow.
And I sent him off to work with some other people, and he was already writing. By the time he was like 15, he was writing percussion quintets for the San Francisco Youth Symphony. I mean, just heavy kid. Yeah, really
Wow.
great drummer. Anyway, that
Wow.
was cool.
Congratulations.
Yeah,
That's huge.
that's
So
fun.
what are you guys finding in schools? I'm just curious, like, have you have any thoughts on different schools that you could share with us?
Sure, sure. I mean, we only looked at 3 down in Southern California, and there's a bunch more to come still. But my son is a really accomplished jazz piano player, and
Yeah.
we're heading toward. He's a junior now, so we're starting to look at colleges now because he has to
Uh-huh.
apply this year before November.
Uh-huh.
And there's a handful of top jazz programs in the country that we're looking at, but we're also considering the possibility of like a dual track study, dual degree in like engineering and jazz piano or something like that, if it's possible. But
Mm,
there's a lot of schools out there now that are really, really good and that are available at
mm.
different levels for students. In California alone, Cal State Northridge is a really, or Long Beach, Cal State Long Beach is a really good jazz
Huh.
program. Chad
Ah,
Wackerman teaches there.
wow.
At USC, the Thornton School of Music is really, really an amazing program with a wide variety of options. They had this poster they gave out with the music careers in music and all the different areas of music that you could pursue a career in and where they overlap. So from arranger to copyist to composer to instrument repairs to performer and all these different tracks you can take of study within their program. And of course, at USC, the jazz drum head of the jazz drum department is Peter Erskine. So
Oh,
you know,
man.
heavy, right?
Oh, man.
Um,
Wouldn't
uh,
that be wild if your son could be playing piano with Peter Erskine on
it could
drums? That'd
happen
be
if he went there. Yeah, I suppose.
yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
yeah. I'm trying to remember who the heavy people are at UCLA, but I'm spacing out. Anyways, UCLA's got a great program. Cal State, Long Beach got a great jazz program. USC. Um, we're going to be looking at Berklee School of Music in Boston, New England Conservatory, um, Juilliard, Manhattan School of Music, and then the Peabody Institute at Johns Hopkins.
Oh,
So
man.
those are all places that are on our radar that we're considering, and then some other schools too. But I'll keep you guys updated on that. That's kind of an exciting thing for
Yeah,
all.
it is. It is. And congratulations to both of you guys on that. And I just think that in this era of the state of the music industry, that if you want to make a career in it, you should really dot your I's and cross your T's. And so um, I think it'd be a lot harder to make it if you weren't looking at going to college for it.
Yeah, I mean, you're studying with the cream of the crop of instructors in
Yep.
the world that are assembled at these universities, and you're immersing yourself with other kids. What my student who is at UCLA now, he's playing. He told us this semester he's playing in 6 bands,
Wow.
and he's taking private lessons with Clayton Cameron,
Wow. Holy
brush
moly.
master. So like,
Oh, man.
just to be doing that all day, and he's got to take general ed requirements too, English and history or whatever stuff. But um, yeah, it's
That's it.
amazing.
And the networking of all of that is probably the number one of the main
Yeah,
advantages of going.
yeah, I think that's right. The connections you make with the faculty and also with other students.
Yeah. Yeah.
Wolfpack. Wolfpack, that amazing funk band.
Yeah.
They all met at University of Michigan and
Yeah.
became friends and played there, and then they turned into a thing from that. So who you meet in college can be really a formative experience. Yeah.
It's really, really cool. Well, you've got a great list. You're going to have some fun. I hope you're playing more gigs and doing more lessons to help pay for all this.
You should mention. Actually, I have a ton of gigs. So talking about good things, I've got a ton of gigs happening in the next 3 weeks. I think I've got like 8 or 10 gigs.
Wow.
And one of them is with my son. We're doing a trio, straight up jazz trio. We're playing his compositions, some of my compositions with one of a great local bass player, Ali Dudek. And we're playing at the Back Room on the 11th. And then my band Mophone, which has played at Monterey Jazz Festival several times. We've got a gig coming up on Saturday in Berkeley. And then we're doing on Monday and Tuesday. This is really interesting. We're doing one of my friends who's a music educator and middle school band teacher in Menlo Park. He got a grant to bring us down to do presentations to like 4 different schools where we're going to be performing and talking about the history of second line music and its evolution into R&B and funk. So doing sort of like mini presentations for middle schoolers and also performances. We're going to play with the middle school jazz band a little bit. So that's like a 2-day deal, which I'm super looking forward to. That's this next week.
Man, it's a beautiful thing, brother. You're making it happen.
Yeah, there's all different kinds of ways to do it. So
yeah,
it's a cool thing.
Yeah. Well, and you're diverse too, because you're playing gigs and you're a teacher. You do this podcast.
Yeah.
You represent a lot of great companies like Aquarian and Sabian, and man, it's worth all of the effort, man, and it's really paying off, brother.
Nice.
So it's very cool.
I came home from teaching lessons yesterday, and I said to my wife, you know what? I love what I do. I'm really good at it, and I love it, and I'm doing what I'm supposed to be doing. So that's a really good feeling.
There it is. What I love, Ann, is teaching one-to-one private lessons.
Mm-hmm.
That there's nothing like, connecting with the person and helping them evolve and watching that progress.
Totally.
So it's so funny that this day and age, people are like, oh, you're a drum teacher. Oh, what channel? They think that everything is a pre-recorded drum lesson.
Right.
And if that works for you, that's great. But I think you miss that human interaction if you're just filming.
Well, not just the interaction, you also miss someone with really keen eyes and ears on your playing that's telling you and helping explain to you what you need to do to get better and how you need to do it. And that's different from a generic video that's, trying to sort of serve as many people as possible that might not be telling you what you need to hear, right? About what you need to work on. I had a student yesterday, we're working on songs he's participating in the Bandworks program. And, he's got a chart. I gave him a chart of this tune. It was Interstate Love Song by Stone Temple Pilots.
Yeah.
And, there's some cool, chunky 16th note syncopation beats in there.
Yeah.
A couple of cool fills. And he was getting bogged down in the details of trying to get dot every I and cross every T. And like, hey, right now, based on where you're at, you should really be distilling it down to these 2 grooves.
Yep.
Then the 3rd groove and then the 4th. And don't even worry about the fills and don't worry about all the little bass drum variations. Just get these pieces. If you can put those together in the right order, you're going to be playing the song and doing great. And then if you have time, you can continue to sort of get the next level of, subtlety and detail. But that's what a teacher can offer is like sort of personally tailored advice on how to work on what you need to work on to get better, to help you achieve your goals, to play these tunes that you're trying to play, whatever it is.
Exactly. Man, you know what? You just described kind of like what my book series is, not to give myself a shameless promotion, but I've got a beat, and this beat is the general groove of the song. And it's just the primary notes. So you don't have to have all of the little nuances completely together to start just working on the groove, because the groove and the feel is the most important thing.
Right.
And sometimes a newer player, if you're trying to work in all these little extra notes and open and close hi-hats, you're just killing the groove, man. And you don't want to kill a groove just for a note,
Right. That's right.
Yeah.
You got to prioritizing, right? You don't want to put the cart before the horse where you're trying to get these little subtleties that you think are so important. Oh, but that's where the cool stuff is. Well, yeah, maybe that is where some of the cool stuff is. But if you can't lay down the groove and keep a good pocket, no one cares about any cool stuff.
Exactly.
It's actually not cool.
Yeah, man. So people have got to watch it. I know it's like good to like push for something, shoot for a higher level. And of course we're doing that. But how can you play something level 8, 9, 10
Right.
if there is such a thing.
Right.
Um, when you just got to be able to get the feel
Right.
first.
Get level
So
3 before you worry about level 4 and 5. Right.
yeah.
Exactly.
And then the other great thing about interaction with a one-on-one student, I is you have a conversation like this, and then they ask a question, and
Mm-hmm.
then as a player, you grow
Mm-hmm.
um, from that question, because they might ask a question that you never really thought of that is very, very thought provoking, like what we talked about before we went on, the
Mm-hmm.
history of the swing poles. Like, where did that come from?
Right.
Right? And so
And I
what
was
you
and I was prepared to answer Rick's question about it, and then I did a quick search and found a 120-page dissertation that somebody had done from University of North Texas on the history and evolution of the ride cymbal pattern. I'm like, oh, let me go read that first.
Yeah.
There's
Yeah.
so much more to know, right? Oh,
Yeah. Absolutely, absolutely. So that's a future episode.
hey, here
So
I can't tell who this is, but I'm guessing it's Kathy. But one of your students says some of the coolest lessons have been focused on a specific question I've had, something I bring up beforehand or idea that branches off whatever topic we're working on. Rick is so knowledgeable and helpful. Of course he is.
oh,
We can't see who it is that's making these comments, but that's it.
oh,
That's it.
oh,
Sometimes lessons are all about here's the program, here's the drills, here's the beats, practice this. And some of the best lessons that I've ever had have been when it's not that, where we're talking about something that's come up in the context of conversation or something a student brought in, the show they went to, a recording they're listening to. How is it that drummers do this? And we get off all into that, and there's so much good stuff to talk about. So speaking of
absolutely.
questions and good stuff to talk about, Rick, let's
Yes.
start. I'm going to throw it to you. Let's start with one of the questions that's come up for you from one of your students, and we'll dig in.
Okay, just a real simple question a student asked is, do you tune your toms to actual notes on the piano?
Pitches, right?
Yeah,
Um,
actual pitches.
so I do not.
Yep.
I know there are drummers who do,
Yep.
and there's a terrific app if you don't have it or if you aren't familiar with it. It's called look it up so I don't get it wrong. It's called iDrumTune Pro.
Yep.
And it's a tuning app that I think it costs like $5 or $6. It's a bargain for it. You can use it to tune your drums so that they're in tune, and also that you can tune them to pitches with it if you want.
If you want. Okay.
Um, and yeah, I know some drummers who do tune their drums to pitches. Toms we're talking about will
Yep.
tune in thirds. That's a
Thirds.
common interval, or sometimes they'll go 1-4-5 interval.
Right.
There's no right or wrong. So for me, because you're playing songs, because I'm playing songs that are changing keys all the time, right?
Right.
It's not like we're always playing in the same key, in which case I could really get the toms to ring at certain pitches.
Right.
You're just kind of going for a nice cadence from your high to low tom. Doom, 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 doom.
Right.
If you get that sounding good, that sort of does the job for me. So I don't tune my toms to pitches, but I do tune them, to a certain spread relative to each other just by ear.
Mm-hmm. There you
How
go.
about you?
Well, yeah, I go for that ballpark of the thirds interval.
Mm-hmm.
I do go for that. A helpful way that I found is the horse race song, da 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 da. The so I'll go ba 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 ba. And that is a great like little melody that I can reference to try to get that nice even interval. But I also find that every drum sort of has its sweet spot.
Mm.
And where I usually go is I try to get like that drum just wants to sound good at that pitch.
Mm-hmm.
And then the mid tom, that wants to sound there. And then the lowest tom, and I find like every drum, I think it kind of has its little sweet spot.
Mm-hmm.
And then I try to, because I think sometimes you're like, well, I'm trying to fuss with this certain pitch, but maybe the drum doesn't want to go there.
Mm.
So so I factor that in as well. And I don't really get any. I know there's been some drums or heads that have like a note on it
Oh, really?
Yeah, and
Okay.
I've never really got that. I don't know how that.
I don't know how that could make sense when, I mean, depending on the drum itself, it's going to have a range of pitches that it could tune up to.
Yeah.
Yeah. But,
So
another consideration in this is how big are your drums, right? If
right,
you've got 12, 13, well, that's going to be a different spread than a 12, 14,
right.
right? You might tune to a different interval depending on how big a gap you have in your tom sizes.
There it is. And I think that's one of the fun things about drums, man. It's the most customizable instrument of them all, right?
Mhm.
Trumpet has 3 valves, a regular guitar has 6 string, piano has what, 88 keys. But drums, man, you could have a giant Neil Peart set or this
Mhm.
monster like I've got here or a nice little jazz kit. And so it's cool. We can play around with it too. And definitely heads
Oh, yeah.
affect
Massively.
everything so much
Massively.
too.
Right, right,
So
right. Yeah.
yeah.
Well, actually, go ahead.
I've messed with the drum dial, but I think I've got to spend more time with it.
Mhm.
Um, that hasn't because I thought, okay, the drums sound pretty good, and then I've gotten the drum dial out and started adjusting that measurement of the perfect tension,
Mhm.
and and it felt like I threw it off. So no diss on drum dial. I'm sure it's just that I haven't put enough time into it. So
Mhm. Mhm.
I'd be curious if anybody out there watching has a drum dial and and if they can make that work. I might need to go back to the drawing board.
I have a drum dial that I've used
Yeah.
before. Pretty much every tuning product that's come out, I've tried at one time or another. The TuneBot, which is essentially what the app does,
Yeah.
tune. Um, and the drum dial is effective. It measures tympanic pressure, so it's the pressure that the head is kicking back into the device based on
Yeah.
where you place it on the drum.
Yeah.
A little thing, so you can place it exactly the same spot relative to the hoop as you move it around the drum. But to be honest with you, I've used all the different devices at times,
Mhm.
and sometimes I'll tune it using a device, and I'm sure it's some user error, but I don't end up happy with the tuning, and then I just go back to doing it by ear, and I end up where I want it to be.
There it is.
I think that those devices can get you accurate, and they can get you close.
Yep.
Um, and depending on what they measure, and depending on the circumstances of your drum, like how old it is, how new it is, how rusty and oxidized your tension rods are, all that kind of stuff, it can
Mhm.
all have an impact. Is the hoop perfectly round? Is the shell warped? Are the bearing edges clean? All those things can have impact on tuning.
Yeah.
So the devices aren't, uh, guaranteed gold every time, but they measure what they measure, and they measure it accurately. So it's hard to
Yeah.
argue with that.
I think the key is you got to have to experiment,
Yeah. Mhm.
and that's one of the fun things about
Yeah.
being a drummer.
All those things are great. I
Yeah.
recommend the drum dial. I recommend the TuneBot. I recommend the iDrum Tune app, tuning app. They're all great things to have. You can sort of pick the one that you like the most and be happy with it.
Yeah, and if all else fails, do the trumpet horse race. An interesting thing, man. I've had these Aquarian Studio X with the power dot, the clear
Mhm.
Studio X with power dot for about a year and a half now. And now that I've got this rig set up to really record this way, I thought maybe I should change the heads.
Mhm.
And man, the toms when I hit record, they just sound so good. And it's just amazing to me. Like, do you sometimes find that a head that you've played on it just could start sounding better as time goes by?
Uh, no.
No? Okay.
No,
I know it's off the wall kind of
Yeah. I mean,
concept.
I think probably I don't think your head is changing. I think you're just hearing the drum through a different context, maybe. I don't know, but I
Yeah.
mean, I don't think heads sound better as you play them. I don't think they can sound worse.
Well,
Um,
no doubt. No doubt they can. And it's like, uh-oh, this thing is not sounding good. It's
right, tend to replace, yeah.
time to replace it. But I was just surprised that wow, it sounds really, really good as is. So I'm not gonna mess with it. I'm not gonna
Yeah,
change the head.
yeah, yeah. I mean, I certainly have found that, when I retune them, they sound better.
Yeah, well, yeah. I don't know. I had the concept that maybe that they've been played so much that there's not so many extra overtones all of a sudden.
Oh, yeah. I wonder what Chris Brady would have to say about that.
We have to ask
Maybe Chris
Chris.
Brady. Yeah, we'll have to. Yeah,
Yeah,
that's a really good question. Do
Chris
heads
Brady
sort of
Aquarian.
mellow out and chill out with it when the overtones as they stretch a little bit? Interesting.
Yeah,
Um,
yeah, yep. So what about you? What questions have come your way this week as a drum teacher?
well, it's funny we're on the topic of heads and gear a little bit, um, because I have a student who's really really good drummer. I'm actually asking him to sub in one of my bands for me for some gigs that I got.
Wow.
So I'm excited to. It's going to be a real growth opportunity for him. Stretching.
Yeah.
It's great, and he came out to
Well,
the show.
there's a real great reason why to study with someone in person,
Yeah,
right? Do you need a
right,
sub? You've elevated your skill level to the point where I could refer you, and you've showed up on time for every lesson.
right,
There
right,
you go.
right. And you got to imagine I'm going to be very very picky about who I might refer to sub for me. So it's
Oh
going to be
yeah.
someone who's responsible, who's on the job, who's or on the ball, who's got the skill set and the personality to work well with band leaders. Anyway,
Right.
so uh, he he actually studied. He's maybe 30 years old. His name's Mickey, and he studied with me when he was 13 for like 4 years. Went off to college, didn't hear from him for 20 years, whatever, 10, 15 years. And then about 2 years ago, he called me up. He said, "Hey, I don't know if you remember me, but Mickey, I took lessons with you years ago, and I'm interested in getting back into it." And I said, "Oh, of course I remember you, and absolutely, let's start back up." And anyways, he'd been playing on and off all these years, and definitely has upped his game quite a bit. And he's playing in band works. He's really good drummer and
Nice.
really hard worker. So this is great. Anyway, great opportunity. So he is playing on an electronic kit at home,
Okay.
which he bought during COVID because he's home all the time and needs something
Yeah.
quiet to play. And it's time for him to buy a pro level acoustic kit.
Okay.
So this has been a big topic of conversation for us. Like,
Yeah.
what do I get? How do I figure out what to get?
Oh
Where do I
yeah.
try them out? Right.
Yeah.
And nowadays, there just aren't that many drum shops left. Right. So many of them have closed, and it's impossible to compete with the big box stores.
Right.
So there's Guitar Center in town, and honestly, it's a terrible place to buy a drum set.
Yep.
They've got maybe 3 or 4 kits set up on the floor, all out of tune. They're all student
Mhm.
level kits, and they've got
Mm.
another dozen kits stacked up on the rafters that you can't try out.
Yeah.
And they're not going to spend a half hour setting them up and tuning them up for you to actually try it out. So
Yes.
and at least I know in LA there's a Hollywood drum shop. I know there's some big drum shops left, Long Island drum shop, Memphis drum shop.
Yeah. Pro drums in Hollywood.
Yeah, there's
Yeah.
maybe a dozen shops in the country still servicing the community the way
Yeah.
it should be.
Yeah.
Depending on where you live, there may not be one. And so
Right.
so we've taken to listening to lots of YouTube videos.
Yep.
And I told him to start paying attention when he goes out to hear bands live. What drums are the drummers playing, and does he like the sound of them?
Mm-hmm.
And we've also stumbled on some videos where drum makers, or maybe I should say drum assemblers. You're familiar with those guys around the country, the independent drum makers who buy Keller shells or Nordic shells, and they put the hardware on and stain them and do the bearing edges and cut them and all that.
Yep.
And that's what I play. I play Brooks drums, and those are custom boutique assembled drums.
Yep.
And some of these guys have these videos that say, you know what, the wood doesn't make a difference.
Yes.
It doesn't make nearly the difference everybody thinks it does. And they demonstrate this by having 6 toms in a row lined up, tuned up with the same head. One's mahogany, one's birch, one's maple, one's a hybrid, one's whatever, koa or whatever, or oak. And they hit the tom, and they hit the next tom, and the next tom, and the next tom, and I'll be damned if they sound almost exactly the same.
Yes. Yes.
And it's I think people go down the rabbit hole of what wood to buy.
I think so.
And they get too wrapped up in it when really the drum sounds like a drum, more or less. I believe I can hear a difference between maple and birch, and I also believe that if in a blindfolded test, there's a chance I could get it wrong.
Yes.
Right.
Yes, I totally agree. I'm sure if we were to record 3 different kits made of 3 different woods and played the audio back, no one would be able to tell. Maybe a couple people a little bit could
Right.
pull it off. I have a mahogany hit kit, and I can tell definitely it's got a little bit more of the lower end warmth.
Right.
Yep,
So, you know,
yep,
the bigger difference is going to be the heads, the tuning, right? Those have major, major impact on how your drum sounds. So, anyways, coming
yeah.
back to the question,
Okay,
Rick, I'll put it to you.
okay,
You've got a student who's
yep,
basically, you know, approaching professional level, semi-professional level of playing,
yep,
and
yep,
they're in the market for their first pro level kit.
yep.
How do you advise them?
First thing I do is I ask them to really focus on what sizes of drums
Mm,
they want. Like
mhm,
what is going to work for them, you know? And we know a 22 by 16 kit is probably the most common used kick drum. But so if they're playing rock, I would say, man, you should probably get a 22
mhm,
because you want that low end thud, But if maybe they're playing jazz or more eclectic, or they're doing
mhm,
lots of gigs, maybe in a city, and need to move a lot of gear around from clubs, to, from curbside to club, a 20-inch
mhm,
inch kick might be a great idea.
mhm,
So I would look at that, and then I'd also look at what toms I want. Do I really, do I really want two toms, two mounted toms? For me, I think it's always really important to get at least two mounted toms, and of course, you got to have a floor tom.
why why two up? Why not one up, two down? You have two up
Um,
down there, right?
the only reason I have one up, two down. The
Mm,
only this kit does have, this is a 13-inch Ludwig. I have a 14 also, but it doesn't fit because I've got this
mhm,
multi pad here. So that's kind of the bummer. And then I've got the rototoms up here.
mhm,
So I've got a lot of high end stuff on this side. So I just find for diversity in gigs, sometimes it's hard to have the second floor tom. Like a second floor tom doesn't fit in a lot of small clubs.
right.
Here's the drum stage and the wall is right here. It's like, uh-oh, I can't fit a kick and two toms. So
Mhm,
I'd like to have that advantage of being able to have two toms in front. Even if you don't use them, I think that's a good thing. Because remember, if you buy a bunch of drums, you don't need to use them all.
mhm.
So I would just consider all of that in, and then like you said, man, I think the drum head is so much part of the sound. I mean, I don't know what percentage, 30%, 40%, maybe even more.
Right.
It's just so vital. So um I would just straight up get some Aquarian heads, honestly.
Yeah, well, you know,
Well, it happens all the time. Students come in and they buy sets, buy high-end DW sets, and they ask me to come in and tune them, and it's hard to tune. And
I've
then I'll take an Aquarian Super 2 ply, um, and instantly it's just easy to tune and sounds great. So if you don't believe me, just I wouldn't buy a whole set of heads too. I would go with one tom,
mhm,
maybe the 13-inch or the highest tom,
right.
and buy like 5 different drum heads. Go
Yes.
ahead, buy heads from all different manufacturers. If you're not sure, but I'd buy some single plies, I'd buy some double plies, and just try it and listen to what that tom sounds like.
Yeah.
You
There
know,
was
and then pick. Go ahead.
back in the day, there probably are some YouTube videos where they have head shootouts where they've got the same tom with a bunch of different heads, and those are
Mhm.
great things to check out. Back in the day, there was a drum shop in San Francisco called Drum World that's closed, and they had set up in their shop a dozen rack toms all on a rack that were the same tom with different head combinations. And I was like,
Yeah,
oh, that's fantastic. You know, you really can get a very quick sense of how different the heads sound and what you like the sound of.
yeah,
Um, but yeah, Aquarian, super consistent, super good quality. They sound great. I know we're Aquarian representatives, but that's my truth. I didn't Aquarian didn't call me and say, hey, you want to deal with us on an endorsement? I reached out to them because I already used their product. I was like, hey, this is you guys are the best. And you know
That's that's kind of how it should be,
yeah,
you know.
all right.
Um, so then you've got your sizes, and
Hmm.
you know what drums that you want.
Hmm.
So, now it's like, well, then you might start looking at finishes. I just think the finish is really important. Like, it should be something that resonates with you, that you picture yourself. Everything is sales. If you're a drummer, you're selling yourself to the band and the audience. You should have a brand, your vibe. And what's that look going to be? Is it going to be a black kit? Is it going to be a white kit? Is it going to be an acrylic kit? What is it that just, oh man, I love that
Hmm.
makes you want to play?
Yeah, that
So
to me is the most important piece. Is like,
yeah,
I know some people go, oh, I don't care what color, but you want to get a drum set that looks that when you look at it, makes you happy to look at it, and it makes you want to play it. That's it. You don't want to be like,
absolutely.
oh, that's. I guess I'll take this one. It's the only one they had in the store. Brown isn't my favorite color, but whatever. I don't really care about color. Well, if you have those kind of mediocre feelings about it to begin with, you're not going to probably get better, right? Get
Exactly.
something you like the look of. It's really simple.
Ex- exactly. So now you're like, okay, well, I was thinking about, maybe the student is thinking about this certain manufacturer. Well, they don't make a kit in those sizes,
Right.
or they don't make a kit in the color that I like.
Right. Or
S-
I don't like the look of the hardware, the feel of the hardware, the adjustability of it. I want the ball and socket tom bracket. Right.
Oh man, and hardware is just so important as well. I mean, the hardware is the stuff that we actually connect to, man. Our feet are right there, and if the hardware is kind of wonky, it's just not that good. So I think there's certain companies that make amazing hardware, like DW and Yamaha and Pearl.
Right.
Um, they make amazing hardware. So to me, it's like, well, do I want a manufacturer and that makes some drums that I like, but their hardware is maybe some generic hardware that they throw on there too. So, it doesn't have to match, right? You could play a Ludwig drum kit with Yamaha hardware, so to speak.
Right.
But maybe that doesn't resonate with you. Maybe you want like all the same thing. So I
Mhm.
I would consider the quality of the hardware and the ease of the hardware. Do you want um are you gigging a lot? So maybe I don't want like
Super
double
happy.
brace giant
Right.
tubes.
Right. Right.
Yep.
When I was
So
when I was a kid, I made the mistake of, I started on my Rogers uh, uh, Big R drum set in the 70s. Actually, it was the early 80s. And it came with, kind of cheapish hardware. So then about 3 or 4 years later, I was like, oh, I'm going to go upgrade all my stands to the double braced. And I went to the store. I was like, oh, for $10 more, I could get the super heavy duty double braced with the balanced weight on the back of the cymbal stand. And I'm like, oh,
yeah,
heaviest stuff, right?
yeah,
$10 more for the super heavy duty. I wasn't
yeah.
hitting that hard. And then, when I started gigging, I was like, oh, I made a mistake.
Bad move. Dude, I
Terrible.
did the same. I have to tell you, I did the same thing.
That's so funny.
I totally did the same thing. I felt like that was one of my rookie mistakes,
Yeah,
man.
right, right.
Yeah,
Now I
yeah.
play this Yamaha Crosstown stuff that's like it's aluminum and it's feather. Like,
Oh, you're playing with that stuff. See that? I
love
have one of those snare stands and I love it. It's
it. You can
for
lift
someone like you gigging that much in San Francisco, I bet
it
you are curbside to gig all the time,
all the time. You can lift
right?
the cymbal stand with your pinky. I mean,
Yeah,
honestly, it's like 2 pounds or something crazy like that.
yeah.
And
Bart mentioned that he was messing around with some of that hardware, and he just said, just watch out if you have a lot of outdoor gigs because wind could take away.
oh, because it's so lightweight. I haven't I have had some outdoor gigs. Hasn't blown away yet.
Hasn't blown away yet. Yeah,
Yeah.
just a consideration. So then I think what you have to do, I mean, I don't see anything wrong with looking at your idols.
Hmm.
I hope we're not going too much in depth in this, but we're drummers. We love gear talk.
Hmm.
Um, Look at the idols and see what they play, but keep in mind that they might be playing that drum kit working with that manufacturer because they got a good deal.
Well, that's my point. Like it doesn't matter what brand you buy. It honestly doesn't. Like they're
Yeah.
all going to sound great. The high-end Ludwig, the high-end Yamaha, the high-end Tama, the high-end Pearl kits, they're all really well made with lots of attention to detail. And you wouldn't have all these amazing artists playing on all these different brands if they weren't great quality drums. So,
That's it.
find out what you like, check them out, try as many as you can, if at all possible. Get to one of those big drum shops like we mentioned earlier, and see what you can see.
I think that's it in a nutshell, Jeremy. It's like get what you want and build it around you, and don't worry because because nobody's really going to care in your band what drum
No,
kit
no,
you're
no.
playing, really.
There was one time I was at a music camp, and there was a really amazing conga player there. His name's Edgardo Cambone. He's a local Bay Area guy, monster conguero, and he took a solo on these two wooden stools, and he put the stools up in front of him and put a close mic on each one, and took like a conga drum solo on the stools, and man, he tore it up.
Oh
All these
man.
different tones he was able to get out of him, and I was like, oh my god. And the name of his little skit was "It's Not the Drum."
I love that.
So man, I've heard
Yeah.
it was Victor Lewis play on a cheap piece of junk old kit, and man, he sounded amazing. So
Yeah. Yeah. For the record, I play I'm a drum set collector. I've always my studio is all about playing on nice gear. So my main kit is my Ludwig kit. That's this kit. It's a Ludwig Maple from the 70s. So also consider what vintage, whether you're looking for more of a vintage sound or
right.
more of a modern sound too.
Yeah,
So
good point. Good point.
that's a factor too. Like an old Gretsch is going to have a nice vintage sound. So your high-end kit actually could be a used set,
Yeah.
you
No.
know. So that's my main kit, but I've got a Pearl mahogany. I've got the DW acrylic, which is just so fun. When I gig with DJs, and I've got the drum lights in it, that is just like a look, and it's just so fun. So,
Yeah, and for the record, since we're show and tell, I've got my primary kit for most for jazz and jazz related gigs is a Brooks custom kit.
yep.
But I also have a Yamaha Maple Custom that I've used for years and years. That's a phenomenal drum set. Sounds
Oh
amazing in
yeah,
the studio. And
yeah.
then the teaching kit is a Sonor Maple. I forget the brand, the model, Force 3007 or something like that, but 15, 20 years old. And Bandworks had a deal with Sonor, and got those at a really good price, and they're really solid. It's a great teaching kit. I have several students who have bought them. Really good.
There you go. There you go.
You
And
know,
I've asked a lot of engineer. Oh, I'm sorry.
that's two drummers with 6 different brands of drum kit.
There it is. You had Bart. Bart plays Gretsch
Yeah.
drums and Chip plays trick drums. So,
Yeah.
and I've asked a lot of studio engineers.
Hmm.
It's ask around. I said, what do you find as your go-to stuff? And I do have 4 consistent answers that I hear.
Oh yeah.
And that's DW, Ludwig, Yamaha, and Gretsch.
Mm-hmm. I would throw Pearl in there too.
Yeah. I would throw Pearl in there too.
And Joe Bergamini would throw Tama in there because he plays Tama.
He plays
Right?
Tama. Yeah.
He's a
Yeah. I mean, Tama, there's a great company with great hardware.
Yeah.
I mean, and a lot of the metal drummers play Tama. So shout out to my brother-in-law Gene Hoagland and his wife, my sister-in-law Laura Christine. They are starting a tour. They're on the plane now. They're going to do a month-long tour of the country. The band is called Death to All, which is members of the original extreme metal band Death. And Gene is going to be drumming with them, and Laura is going to be out on tour supporting in a band, Newcomb. She's playing guitar on that. So, little off the topic, but if you are, look for them in your city because they're going to hit up the whole country.
Awesome.
Yeah. Yeah.
Rick, okay, back to you. That was one of my students' questions. What's another one of yours that came up this week?
Okay. So I have a student who's plays guitar, bass, and drums.
Mm.
and she has a band and they're auditioning drummers.
Hmm.
And she said, "Do you have any tips on how we should audition our a new drummer?"
Great. What's a great question?
That's a tough question too. Yeah. So what do you Now, how would you like to be auditioned?
Yeah, right. I mean, there's a lot. That's just such a good question, and it
Yeah.
makes me think probably a lot of bands that audition drummers, don't really know how to audition a drummer, right? They have a drummer
Right.
come in, prepare
Right.
a handful of tunes,
Yeah.
and then it can be a subjective thing. It can be a quantitative thing too. Like clearly this drummer, had time issues, right? Or clearly this drummer didn't know the arrangements.
Right.
But assuming everyone sort of checks the boxes, then what is it? Well, vibe is really important, right? How you get
Right.
along, how you interact with them. That's really
Yeah.
important
That's huge.
because you could have two drummers who are like, pretty much comparable. And then, but this one we really seemed to click with and got along with. We laughed with. It was, the hang seemed good, and like, oh yeah, I'd much rather hang out with that person than the first one.
Yeah.
But let's get down to brass tacks. Like on a technical level, um, I think one of the most important things is to offer or have the drummer prepare a variety of different kinds of tunes. So,
Oh, yeah.
right, like if your band does play a range of feels or styles. You do some funk and you do some blues and you do some shuffles and you do some rock. Well, make sure you run a drummer through all those paces to see how they feel, how their feel is with each of the styles.
Yeah.
If you right, because otherwise you might be surprised. You play a couple of kind of groovy rock songs and then it comes up to play this Latin thing and you're like, oh, and you did, at the next rehearsal, and like turns out the drummer can't play a Latin feel at all, right?
Yeah.
So make sure you run them through the paces of all the different kinds of things that the band will be playing
Yeah.
stylistically, right?
Yeah. I like that a lot. Yeah.
I would say also make sure you run the drummer through a range of tempos, right? So a lot of drummers can sound really good at a narrow range of tempo, like at a
Right.
certain comfort zone where like they like to play all their licks where they've developed them at this tempo, and they may struggle at slower tempos. They may struggle at
Right.
faster tempos.
Right.
So, pick your slowest song and your fastest song to run them through. And you don't have to play the
Good.
entire song, it's more just to sort of like see how the song feels. This song feels, with this drummer. And the other thing I would say is make sure you audition each of your drummers with the same batch of songs so you can compare apples to apples.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
And I would say record your auditions with your drummers.
Okay. Okay. Yeah.
Then you might think something in the moment and then you don't remember or you didn't have much of an impression. So listen back and the tape will tell you, which drummer sounded the best and which drummer you sounded the best with.
Yeah.
Did the drummer make you play any differently?
Ah.
Was that
Yeah.
a good thing or was that a bad thing? Did it,
Yeah.
oh, wow,
Yeah.
this drummer really came in and he had a different groove for this song that really kind of changed the vibe on it. I kind of like that. That was really creative. I responded to that creative input. That could be a thing.
Yeah. Yeah.
These are things just to sort of pay attention to and think about. But it's easy to get caught up, I think, when you're auditioning a drummer. You're nervous maybe, or they're nervous, and there's like the sort of like awkwardness, and um, you're worried about playing your parts right, but make sure that's not what you're paying attention to. Like make sure you're really listening,
Yeah.
right? And not thinking about other stuff or your own parts. It doesn't matter if you make mistakes.
Right.
Um, did they show up on time?
Mm-hmm.
You know,
Obviously a big
were
one.
they were they cool? Did they smell bad? Did they reek of smoke or pot or whatever? Like,
Yeah.
is that a problem for you?
Yeah.
Um, those are things to pay attention to. But I think on the
Yeah.
sort of brass tacks level, it's like range of tunes, range of tempos. Is dynamics an important aspect of how your band plays? Right?
That's huge.
If
Yeah,
so, and it should be,
should
make
be.
sure the drummer can play comfortably, quietly. There's a
Right,
lot of drummers who can't.
right,
And you may
right.
not know that if you're just playing all your, heavy ones.
Yeah.
So, and you might have all of what, half hour, an hour, 2 hours to
Mhm.
audition a drummer.
Right.
So you got to really plan that out and use your time wisely, especially if you're doing drummers back to back. Everyone's coming in for a half hour. You want to get as much information out of that half hour as you can.
Yes.
Um, yeah, that's what I got.
Man, I think all of your points are really, really, really fantastic. It makes me think that a band should write out the characteristics of what they need in a drummer.
Yeah,
You know,
right. What?
we're gonna need you to play soft and loud, or we need you only play loud. So that's it. We're looking for a loud drummer, or we're only looking for a quiet drummer, and then you know check those boxes. What do you really, really need? Do you need somebody who's going to do the Latin? We have one Latin song. Okay, we're going to need that. And I really like the point of you don't even need to finish out the entire tune,
Right.
because I think
Arrangements you can put on
a
later.
band is used to like practicing, and like we're practicing it for the gig.
Right.
So that's a different thing than we're auditioning somebody.
Right. Right.
I
Yeah.
know you want to test to see if they know the arrangement,
Maybe
maybe.
that could be a
Yeah.
thing, or it could not be as important because you're like, oh, if, at this level, drummers will learn the arrangements lickety split, or that can be a sign of how prepared they are. Let's see, did they learn the arrangement? And
Right.
how attention to detail. Sure, that could be
Yes.
important too.
Yeah.
But if you're like, if you can usually know things very quickly when you hear
Yeah.
a drummer play with or without the band, like
Yeah.
just by the way they sound, the way they interact with the instrument. Is
Yeah.
this a drummer who's meek, plays meekly and kind of tentatively,
Yeah.
or is this a drummer who plays with command and
Right.
confidence? You can hear
Right.
that in 10 seconds, right?
Right. Right.
Is this a drummer who has chops and technical skill, or is this a drummer who doesn't, but still can have a good feel? I mean, those are all things that you can discover really quickly without playing through a whole song.
Yes.
And you'll know, even if you don't know, even if you're not technically advanced yourself and you're kind of a whatever low level garage band and just trying out drummers, you can know by just how does it make you feel? How do you feel playing your instrument when you're playing with that drummer?
Yes.
Right.
I love that. Yeah, does that drummer make it easier for you to do your part?
Yeah,
Mhm.
that's right. One of the highest compliments I recently got was from this. I'm playing with this amazing jazz and avant-garde piano player named Erica Oba. Her sister Hitomi is I'm a professor at UCLA teaching jazz studies there, and Erica's a pianist and composer here in the Bay Area. Really amazing, dynamic player. And she said to me, I actually played with her in a different band that we were both in, and she said to me after the first rehearsal with that other band, we had never played together. She said, you make it so you are one of the easiest drummers to play with that I've ever played with.
Oh,
And I said,
that's
oh man, that's high praise. Like
that's
that's what I
beautiful.
want to hear.
Yeah.
It just
Yeah.
kept going like that. And we said, oh, let's play together and make our own band outside of that band. And that's what's happened. So
Oh, that's beautiful.
you,
That's a great thing, man. Congratulations. I
thanks.
I don't I don't doubt that she's stoked having you, man, you know.
Well, the feeling's mutual, but the point of
Yeah,
the
man.
story is more about if you can be a drummer that feels easy to play with, that's a good way of framing it. That's a good way of thinking about how you want to play the drums.
Right. And there's all different kinds of talent too. You might find a drummer who's really, really good. They're just not right
Great. I love that.
for
Let's talk
you,
about that.
because look at you and me, how different we are in the way we play too.
Yeah, we
I mean,
should
I
be
know there's a lot of similarities and we both could cut a lot of different gigs, I hope.
right.
But man, there's definite gigs that you would be the best, like
Right.
one of
And
us might really
better
gravitate
know.
towards that's a good drummer for
Definitely.
that band.
Right. I could imagine there's some gigs we could both play very, very well and anybody be happy with either of us. And then there's certain gigs I'm really a better fit for that, and you're really a better fit for that.
Yeah.
And I'll tell you a story. You know, when I was in the early '90s, when I first moved out here, excuse me, I had a regular gig at this club in San Francisco. It was a bar, really. That was called North Beach Brewing Company. San Francisco Brewing Company. San Francisco Brewing. It was in North Beach, and I had every 2 Saturdays. I had it was my night. Like I made friends with the owner, and he liked my playing, and said, "Oh man, bring in whoever you want." So for about 2 years running, I had every 2 weeks on a Saturday night a trio gig at this place, and mostly tourists drinking beer and cheeseburgers. And I decided to use it like a laboratory. And I pretty much, though there was some repetition with who I would bring in, I played with everybody I could think of. I called people I didn't know and said, "Hey, Mr. Guitar Player, I've got this gig. You want to play?" And I must have played with, I don't know, easily like 2 to 3 dozen, maybe more different musicians.
Mhm.
And there were some people I called and I thought, "Oh, I know who this guy is. This person, this guy's a really amazing, technically monster piano player." And I'd play all these gigs, and it wasn't always the most technically skilled players that I felt the best with.
Right.
There were some players I was like,
Yeah.
"Oh my God, you're amazing." Like
Yeah.
anyone listening to you would be like, "That's an amazing musician, technical
Yep.
prowess, creativity, chops,
Yeah.
musicality, the works."
Yeah.
But it didn't feel like we were on the same page.
Yeah.
We didn't have a similar concept of punctuation or phrasing, or there wasn't as much sympathetic listening or whatever it was.
Mhm. Mhm.
And from doing that, I discovered, like, just because you're really good technically or skilled musically doesn't necessarily mean that's the best fit.
That is so true. Sometimes we work on all this fancy stuff as drummers, and then we try to use it in the gigs. It's just like, no, we need a drummer in our band who's really honestly less experienced.
Sometimes. Well,
You know?
there's a great story about the White Stripes with Jack White and Meg White, right?
Yeah.
And Meg White, by all accounts, not a very technically accomplished player, kind
Yep.
of rudimentary player. And there
Yep.
was an interview with Jack White one time, and he said he told her he didn't want her to practice
Yeah.
because he didn't want her to be technically clean. He wanted
Right.
this kind of rawness and rough edgedness to their playing, like a garagey kind of, sound, and they achieved that. And
Yes.
it's fantastic. White Stripes are amazing, right?
Right. Right.
And that was she's the if you'd had Vinny Colaiuta in that band, as Vinny's like a god on the
Right.
drums, probably not the best fit.
It wouldn't have worked. It wouldn't have worked.
I'm
Exactly.
sure if they told him what to go for, he would have done it just great. But like,
Yeah.
you know
Yeah.
what I mean?
But
But you're not going to have that, like a real finesse player playing that stuff that's like super simple and rough edged,
right.
right?
But how many of us, we spend all of our time working on developing our good meter, our good timing. And
Yeah.
what if they asked you to play with poor timing?
Yeah, right. I had that
You know?
once. I had that once on a recording
Yeah.
session. They
Yeah.
wanted me to play like it was like barely holding together.
Yeah. Yeah.
And it was hard, but it was good. It was a good
That's
stretch.
fun, man. That's
Yeah.
that's fun. That's what's so cool about being a drummer in the drum community, man. There's so many things that can work, and we've just
Yeah.
gotta, we just gotta try this on and try that on. You know, that almost reminds me, or that does remind me also about kits, man. Like, what if you could come in with this amazing $5,000 DW kit
Mm.
and be all fancy and or not be able to play it. It's the kit isn't gonna get you the gig is what I'm trying to say, right?
Yeah, for
Like, you could
sure.
have that Pearl Export kit with some nice Aquarian heads and some good cymbals and rock the house. No
Crush
one's
it.
gonna
Yeah.
care.
That's right. That's right. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's
Yeah.
not the drums. It's not the drums.
Yeah, man. Boy, Jeremy, it's always a good talk.
Yeah, great stuff, man. I want to double back to something you said that I think was really important. I liked a lot about writing down a list of the qualities you want in a drummer.
Yeah.
You know, that's that's a really good way of, even if you don't sort of adhere to the list too carefully, it's a really good way to help you figure out what you're looking for,
Right.
you know?
Exactly.
I had never done that. Um, and then I got divorced from my first wife, and afterwards was talking to a friend, thinking about, the next partner and what that would look like, and she said, "Why don't you write down a list of all the qualities you'd like this partner to have, this ideal partner you're looking for to have?" And I'd never done anything like that. I said, "Oh, sure, but it's just an exercise. I'll try it." And I wrote these things
Yeah.
down, sense of humor, whatever, all these different aspects. And, then I met Michelle, and I was like, "Oh my God, she checks all the boxes."
I love it.
Sometimes you can check all the boxes and it can not be a good fit, right? Right.
Yeah.
For those X factor reasons. But like, it goes a long way towards helping you get there, because it helps you at least know what you're looking for, instead of like, oh, I don't know, a drummer. I want a good drummer. What does that
Yeah.
mean? What
Yeah.
does good mean to you, and how does good need to relate to what you do?
Right.
You know,
Exactly. It kind of fits into our goal planning episodes that we've had too.
right?
Some of this.
Yeah,
Um, one of the most effective bands I had was a band called Island Fever, which was a San Diego-based band that did they were mainly steel drums, and I played drum set with them. And they had a pool of about 15 or 20 musicians who were all Island Fever.
right,
And you had first call, second call, third call on each instrument.
right.
And, they weren't expecting that someone would be available whenever they had a gig. They were more realistic. They're like, we work with professional musicians who have other gigs. So
Mhm.
it's like, they're not putting you on a retainer, that you're available
Right.
24/7 for them. And so I don't know, I think that kind of made everybody keep on their toes. Like, oh, I want to get calls. I know this other drummer is getting some calls because I saw a picture of
Right.
her on the drums with them. And like, oh,
Right.
they're not working with just me, man.
Right.
They're working with all these different people. And
Mhm.
so that kind of kept you sharp to the music. And I tell you what, they were never without a band member. They never had to turn down a gig. So maybe that's kind of a thing that people could consider also.
Mhm.
We're
Be
gonna hire 3 drummers.
be part of the stable. Yeah.
Yeah, part of a stable. Yeah. So,
Well, looks
man,
like we're already wrapped up. I know there was more stuff we
what?
wanted to talk about, but we'll have to save it for future episodes.
Well, we're so grateful to everybody watching. We're so grateful to all of our students who ask us all these questions and then get us thinking.
Mm,
I think that it helps us grow as players. So
100%.
thank you all. And look what I've got. My student Nancy made me the deck acacia wood coaster.
Oh, that's awesome.
Look at that, man.
I'm getting 2 of these.
These actually are your too. So hit us up if you want a coaster. They're acacia wood.
Right, let me smell.
Smell. Yeah. Yeah. Isn't that amazing?
That's awesome.
My
Tell her.
student Nancy made these up with
Oh,
she's got
cool.
some sort of laser contraption that makes these up. So
That's
Nancy,
awesome.
yeah, so that's pretty fun. So
Rick, speaking of merch, do you have your deck mug handy?
I do have my deck mug.
So you guys may not know this, but we put some merch up on our website. Go to drummersedcon.com and go to our shopping page, and you'll see we've got t-shirts and mugs you can buy.
Yeah.
And pretty soon we'll have coasters up there too,
Uh, that's exciting
which
stuff,
you can
man.
put your mug on so you don't stain your shirt.
Exactly. You know what's so cool is the Rick Stojak Drum Studio coaster. I've had some students say, "Hey, man, I'm practicing more because I had my coffee cup on your coaster."
Right? It's a reminder. It's a reminder. Get to it. I
So
love it.
fun,
I
man.
love it.
So
Well,
fun.
Rick, this has been super fun, man. I think,
Yeah.
the first episode you and I have done just as a duo.
Woohoo.
Yeah, that was super great. I know
Really.
I learned a lot from you, and
Yep.
always enjoy hanging out and talking.
You as well,
We will
brother.
see you guys next. Oh no, I'm out next week,
Yep.
but
Bart and I and Chip should be on next week,
yep.
and we look forward to it. We'll miss you next week. And
You guys too.
thank you all who are watching, and thanks to all the drummers out there. And we really appreciate it. We're grateful. Feel free to hit us up with any questions you have.
Yep.
And don't forget, we've got our Facebook group, and you can post interesting things about drumming and your drumming career and share it with us all.
Mhm.
And we're just grateful to know you all. And so
Right on.
go get some practice, people.
All right, keep us out, Rick.